Hi all, it's been a while since I've done a specific guide for a comp, and I really like Brawler Blasters. It's probably the comp that I've played the most throughout um, Season 3, and even still after the mid-set expansion, it's still a very strong comp. So, I'd like to just talk through how to play Brawler Blasters, and through its variations as well. So, first of all, why Brawler Blasters? Well, this is a comp that is consistently strong early, mid, and late game. It can get you on a win streak early if you hit your brawlers early. It has a very strong mid game, and it also has a very strong late game. In my books, that's the definition of a meta comp. It's just strong all the way throughout. This is one of those teams that's fairly easy to quote force, and I put force in quotes because we live in a meta where forcing a particular team is not good. But if you get the right units and items that can point you in the direction of Brawler Blasters, you can certainly force it from there. Finally, I think this comp is fairly easy to play, which is quite important when you're climbing in TFT, obviously. If you want to climb, you want to play easy comps that are strong. It's pretty much the Jin comp, in my opinion. Having an easy to play, easy to force, yet still strong team. So, what exactly are Brawler Blasters? I'll be taking this slide from my earlier video, which covered the meta, but this one's going to be a bit more in detail. The Brawler Blasters, these are the core units that you'll find in most of the variations. You'll have Jinx and Ezreal as your two blasters, and you'll have your four brawlers as Malphite, Blitz, Vi, and Gnar. Malphite is needed for the Rebel Splash. Blitzcrank is needed when you pair it with Ezreal for Chrono. Vi is just a strong brawler, and Gnar is the strongest brawler. Finally, I hit upon the Rebel Splash already. Your third Rebel unit is usually going to be Aurelion Sol. In fact, it's always going to be Aurelion Sol. I'm thinking about it. You've got Jinx, Malphite, and Asol. That's your 3 Rebel Splash. These 7 units is the core comp for Brawler Blasters, and then you'll have several variations on top of this to supplement your level 8 and level 9 team. So, first variation we'll talk about is the 4 Chrono variation. This is where you have Wukong and Thresh on top of your core units. You'll have a Demolitionist variation, where you'll have GP and Ziggs on top of your core team. It could be Rumble, but Ziggs is slightly better just because you can put it next to Jinx for another Rebel damage bonus. Infiltrator variation, where you have Echo and Fizz on top of your core units. The Mystic variation, which you can achieve by getting Lulu and Soraka, and this variation is only good if you have a Celestial Spat. Well, when I say only good, I mean compared to the other variations. You can still have the Mystic Splash without the Celestial Spat. It just won't have these the top 4 numbers that you'll see here. And finally, there's the 4 Blasters variation, which is slightly different because it deviates from the core team slightly, but we'll talk about that when we get into it in a bit. If you look at all of these diagrams, they're all taken from lorechess.gg, and this column, the first column, represents the win rate of the comp. So how often you'll expect to win if you hit all 9 units and their respective items. Not the exact items don't really matter, but having the 9 units, if you manage to hit the 9 units, you're expected to get top 1 this amount of the time. Second column is for top 4. Again, if you hit all 9 units, this is the top 4 rate that you're expected to hit. The next column is the average placement of the comp, and then on the right you'll see it doesn't really matter, like they're all the same shape basically, but how often you're expected to get top 1, top 2, 3, 4 down to 8, all relative to each other. As you can see, all of the variations have consistently high top 1 and top 4 numbers, with the exception of the Celestial Spat variation. And as you'd expect, having a Celestial Spat to add the Celestial trait is powerful, and you kind of expect that to make this variation stand out. But it is a lot rarer to hit a Celestial Spat, obviously, because spatulas are so rare in the game right now. All the other quote-unquote normal variations have the same or a similar win rate and top 4 rate, so you know that this is a very flexible team. You're almost free to go whatever variation you want. So, this is just a way of showing the core units. You'll have Jinx at the bottom, you'll have your 4 Brawlers, Gnar at the front because you want him to get hit so that he can transform quicker, and AoE CC the whole team. Vi at the front, Vi could be here as well if you had infiltrator problems. Malphite, Asol and Jinx are in a triad for the Rebel. Asol's in the corner because he's a great corner unit. He can't ever get Zephyred or Blitzcrank pulled or anything like that, so he's a great corner unit. And Ezreal down here as well. With any of the variations, you just put them in the appropriate slot. For example, like Wukong could go here and Thresh could go here. Your 2 infiltrators, you just put them wherever will get them closest to the enemy carries. This position is only the default, and of course, if you ever get it down to the final 3 or final 2 people, you'll obviously have to move your comp depending on what the enemy is doing. Like enemy Zephyr, you might have to be wary of your Jinx. Any Blitzcrank, this is fine against, but enemy infiltrator team, just be wary about changing your position. Be flexible. So, I've already touched upon the fact that you can't really force this comp. So when should you go Brawler Blasters? You should go Brawler Blasters if you hit good Jinx items early. These are the popular items that go on Jinx, taken from lorechest.gg. As you can see, Giant Slayer, Red Buff are the 2 most common, so if you get any of these component items early on, that's a good idea to go Jinx. Additionally, Last Whisper Infinity Edge combo is always going to be popular on a champion like Jinx. GA is a good defensive item as well. You should go Brawler Blasters if you also manage to hit any of these things early, like any of them. So if you hit Malphite 2, Alawi 2 by 2-1, that is a pretty good Brawler start. In fact, the nut Brawler start. And you'd expect to go Brawler Blasters from here pretty much always, in my opinion. Unless you have unless you have items that completely do not match Jinx. If you manage to not hit Alawi 2 or Malphite 2, but you do have a singular Blitz as well as like a singular Malphite, that's still a good indication you should go Brawler Blasters. Graves 2 is a fairly good indication, and hitting 1 cog is also a good indication. Like any of these things hit is a good indication to go Brawler Blasters. So, a typical game might look something like this. Let's say you hit Malphite 2 and Alawi 2 early, and you also manage to spike 1 cog and 1 Blitzcrank. Okay. You also manage to find these 4 items. This is a pretty gin start, specifically for Brawler Blasters. With this kind of start, I really don't see myself going anything else. And in fact, I would just slam Red Buff and Giant Slayer on Cogmore straight away to try and win as soon as possible. This is in line with my advice that I commonly preach. It's to play the strongest board every turn. So slamming these items straight away, I think is definitely the best. You'd be looking for Vi and Ezreal from this point on. So this is 2-1. You've leveled up to level 4. You've put in Malphite, Alawi, Cogmore, and Blitzcrank. In my mind, I'm already thinking about what I need to put in to further my progress, to complete my comp. Vi would be good for 4 Brawlers, and Ezreal would be good for Chrono Blasters. You'd also settle for Graves or Lucian to get that Blaster bonus, or any other Chrono unit to get the Chrono bonus as well, is good. So let's say you hit Vi and Ezreal during the game. It doesn't really matter when, you hit them. You'd then, from this point, you'd now be looking for Jinx to replace Cogmore, and Gnar to replace Alawi. For this reason, Cogmore is a really good unit to place Jinx items on early, and Alawi is a really good unit to place Gnar items on. So I didn't really give the exact items you need for Gnar, because it doesn't really matter. You just need defensive items, basically. Frozen Heart, Warmogs, Bramble's Vest, Dragon's Claw, any defensive item is good on Illaoi, and it's also good on Gnar. You'd also want to find a third rebel. So, let's say you find Jinx and Gnar, and you swap them in, and you manage to spike an ASOL. It doesn't have to be ASOL, it can be any rebel unit, but ASOL spike is obviously the nuts, so let's say you hit that, put that in, and from here, you already have your core comp. You just need to fix the positioning from here. So, let's say you have your core comp. Which variation should you go? This is a question that I struggled with in-game for a long time, until I realised it was actually fairly simple. I didn't realise that once you had your core team, there was only a few things you could go, really. Because by level 7, like this here is a level 7 comp. So when you hit level 8, I was usually confused about where I should go. But let's talk about them. The variations you could go from level 8 and 9 are, well, if you hit Wukong 2 or a singular Thresh, that's a good indication that you should go Chrono, 4 Chrono variation. If you manage to find one Gangplank, that's a pretty good indication you should go Demolitionist. If you manage to find Fizz 2 or a singular Echo, then that's a good indication you should go Infiltrator. Okay? Any of these key units should trigger you going this variation. If you have a Celestial Spat, I would strongly recommend trying to force the Soraka Lulu Mystic variation, because that win rate is insane. So what about the 4 Blasters variation? All of these variations are to do with the core Blasters comp. But then there's this variation which is kind of tricky and doesn't really fit that overall pattern. That's why I've kind of separated it from the others. This one is characteristically different because you do not have Vi, and you actually have Vi over Illaoi. Sorry, you have Illaoi over Vi. The reason for this is because you're going to have Cogmore, and Cogmore and Illaoi gets the Battlecast trait, and you're also going to have a Graves in there as well for 4 Blasters. It still has a strong win rate, it's just played a little bit differently. So how would you play this variation specifically? Well, in order to play this successfully, you need to hit Graves 2, Illaoi 2, and a singular Cog pretty early on. If you only hit, for example, one Cog and you don't have Graves 2 or Illaoi 2, it's kind of hard to justify going 4 Blasters, and I think you should just go the 2 Blasters variation and then look for the normal core comp. You'll also need good Cog items early. They are slightly different from Jinx items, but honestly, it's not that different. Red buff is clearly the best, especially with the Battlecast trait. Every tick red buff does gives a tick towards the Battlecast damage or healing trait, so red buff is clearly good. Runans is good, and honestly, Runans is a good item on Jinx as well. Giant Slayer, obviously good. Static Shiv is the only item that's good on Cog that I wouldn't say is good on Jinx, but if you have Static Shiv, that's fine. And Infinity Edge also fine as well. Additionally, Last Whisper would be good as well, because obviously you might want to sell Cogmore for Jinx later on, so those are all good items. As I said, but do want to emphasize, if you don't hit these, like Graves 2, Illaoi 2, and a Cog early on, you can always just have the Cog and transition to the core 2 Blaster variants later on. Okay, you should only go the 4 Blasters variation if you hit these conditions. So, thanks for watching. I hope you guys learned something from this and get the opportunity to play my favourite comp, the Blasters. I hope you also get to use this team to climb in your TFT ranked. Good luck in your ranked games, and get that LP. See you later.